welcome everybody to the Cybersecurity and Identity Management in Azure. I am your co-host, Jacob Foster, and I want to introduce our instructor. His name is Nandi Bowe. He is a top-ranked, highly acclaimed cybersecurity consultant with over 16 years of industry experience working for startups, small businesses, Fortune 500 companies, and government defense agencies. With over 10,000 consulting hours, over 200 high-impact projects, and a 100% job success rate, Nandi continues to deliver top-tier cybersecurity solutions that protect businesses worldwide. He's also passionate about sharing his knowledge with aspiring freelancers, offering actionable strategies to help them succeed in their own careers. His courses are available on Udemy, Skillshare, and other major learning platforms. Nandi also has a book published called Master Upwork: Achieve Financial Freedom Through a Freelance Cybersecurity Career. This book was hailed as groundbreaking and featured by Fox 40, HTV Channel 10, The Globe and Mail, News Channel Nebraska, The Chronicle Journal, The Daily Times Leader, and 98.3 FM radio. Now, I'm going to hand it over to our host, Nandi. He's going to teach you a lot about how to secure your identity management in Azure.
Hey guys. Let me go into the slide. All right. So today we're going to talk about a bit on your cloud identity and the management on the Azure, and we're going to touch base on a bunch of elements with the best practice standpoint, like how those you're going to do a better on the identity and how to do a privilege escalations and the threat actors strategies, some of this monitoring, how you're going to monitor and threat detections and stuff like that. So we're going to share a bunch of stuff. Yeah, the whole idea of today's sessions are basically like you will learn a bit about like what's your what are you going to learn related to your introductions of intra ID formerly called Azure AD, and the authentication mechanism, and related to like what the best practice way or all the security models and the related to conditional access policy. So think about intra ID just at start with what is intra ID. So intra ID is basically in the old school standpoint, who is actually coming from the internal on-prem Active Directory. It is basically a database for identity. So when you're talking about the Azure AD, you have a different kind of authentication mechanism. Your users authenticating, devices authenticating, and also the application and authenticating, and other also similar, like intra, let's say Google Workspace or Amazon, similar kind of external authentication provider also fetching identity from the same database. So that's what you actually call the intra ID software. In the past it was on-prem Active Directory. Microsoft exchanged that facility to on the cloud environment. That's your intra ID and makes it easier, a little bit easier, and also expand that scope. That's basically like an intra ID and Active Directory. That's your two differences. And intra ID also offer your conditional access policy, and that's your the different form of MFA and stuff like that. So it's basically when you just understand the conditional access policy as like your software firewall. So when you're thinking about but you have the identity, how you're going to defend against the different brute force attack, how you're going to defend yourself, different kind of like the token exploitations and similar kind of a situation, how you're going to do that. That's your different policies. You have As the administrator, you can put a policy that people need to use the conditional access policy to turn on that conditional access policy, and the turn on every time they need to go. They need to go as admin. They need to turn on that MFA, and you also have RBAC, also PIM. So just imagine RBAC, like when you actually have the tenant, you have different kind of subscriptions and different kind of workload, and each workload we need to have the least privilege approach also. Like not like every work you give users as a owner, also contribute or something along that line. You wanted to give them the least privilege. But when it's PIM, just think about doing the same thing in the Azure AD role, like an identity role. Instead of giving them global admin or something super admin stuff, you give them what their role specific, and also you wanted to give them that role when they need it, like a just-in-time kind of approach, instead of like giving them a fully kind of a complete access. So there is a different way of managing it. Let's say Cloud Shell, PowerShell. Like Azure tenant also provide like a web-based, the similar kind of platform management kind of thing. Like you actually have a PowerShell. So I'll show you a bit of it. Like once I finish with this, and also PowerShell, the PowerShell like a traditional approach, but you need to log in. And this basically it. Like let me share something from the tenant itself, instead of like keeping it keeping it like just in terms of like when you're looking at just instead of like just going to the PowerPoint. So let's go into that what I just mentioned, that in a lab standpoint. So let's take a look at it, what we actually have. So let's see on the so if you see, this is your current environment. So when you're talking about the Azure AD, so when you're looking at the intra ID, so that's your intra ID. Inside the intra ID, you got the inside the user blade, manage blade, that's your user group. So if you visualizing like in the past that Active Directory standpoint, now it has a similar kind of approach, but like for more web interface. So you have the user group, external identity, that's your role administrator, that's your devices, everything from the same blade. On the monitoring standpoint, you got like sign-in logs, audit logs, log analytic workspace, all of that stuff on the monitoring. So if that, and when you're talking about it also offers the diagnostic settings. So just imagine if you actually have a log aggregator, something like a SIM tools, like a Microsoft standpoint. If you have a Sentinel, that also offers different kind of logs to forward those logs. So Azure AD offers all kind of functionality. And when we're talking about the conditional access policy, I touch base upon like in terms of just a little bit during my initial stage. But like when you say zero trust, Microsoft offers different kind of conditional access policies template to follow that methodology. So how the admin going to need to turn on that conditional access policy every time they need to access the tenant, how the reduce the legacy access. That's your all SMTP based printer sending, scanning and stuff like that. How all users are going to need a MFA, and how block access for unsupported devices, how to manage guest access. So the Microsoft actually have a clear vision. What is this? Their direction toward the zero trust from the identity standpoint. Obviously, we have the like a zero trust in other areas as well. So this is basically a high level. I will be going into the different kind of in details how to do, say, conditional access policy, showcase with your experience and things like that in a different sessions. But this is basically the initial idea. So when you're talking about the RBAC and PIM, if you think about that, like when you let me go out from this, when you're going into that subscription. So when you're looking at, let's say, a subscription in terms of the access control, as you give them a different kind of a role, there is so many are like, as your built-in role is there, instead of you give them a high privilege role. So this is a basically least privilege access role. This is an RBAC role you should be giving them, instead of like giving them the full on subscription, because someone can do a real damage to it. And I also touch base on PIM during my discussion. So here it's basically like with the PIM, you can offer them as they should be able to instead of giving them the active assignment, you can make them eligible. And also the identity, you're going to give them a like a really smaller level assignment, instead of instead of like giving them a full. So and the Azure roles, you can just see, let me show you how many different kind of Azure roles are there also. So you can see all kind of roles is there. So you can use those roles instead of a global administrator roles. So makes it least privilege approach. I also touch base with your the Cloud Shell. So this is basically like a PowerShell version of from the Azure interface. You can log into the terminal interface. It's a very, very powerful tool, and we just need to make sure like we protect that. And that's also a reason we wanted to make sure people don't have like global access, because they can do real damage, because straight away they can authenticate against the subscription, instead of like they need to log in. So it's a very, very powerful. Jack, you have anything else?
Yes, Daniel has a question.
Questions?
Yes, he's about to come online and ask.
Hi. Yeah. So thanks for
Daniel.
this info. I was wondering about, I saw that you're setting up all of these roles through the web interface, right? And I was
Mhm.
wondering if everything that you can do through the web interface can be done through infrastructure as code, or like how is the integration for infrastructure as code to set up all of these roles and access rules?
Great question. Great question. Whatever we actually doing, this exactly like what we're doing, that like web interface, exactly the same roles you can provide using script. And then nowadays you can use a Terraform, something along that line. So you can, whatever you're doing the provisioning, use in also including the managed identity, something along that line. You can put together all of that stuff as an infra, as a code. And what's going to happen, you can follow that terminology. So let's say what kind of tag you're going to use, what kind of naming convention you use on the research on the resource group, what kind of user naming, or what kind of other. So you can put the logical concept, and you can use the infrastructure as a code. So make sure, and also you can use the DevOps to manage those infrastructure code, in terms of like when these things need to be rolled back, or have the iterations and all of that stuff. Great question, Dan. So
Awesome.
that's basically, yeah, it is possible. Microsoft offers that as well.
We have another question about best practices to validate whether a user's role is sufficient.
Thank you, Nandy. So I have a follow-up question on that regarding user roles
Go ahead.
in Azure. So I understand the need for least privilege. When you set up these roles, what are some of the best practices that you have to validate that the permissions are sufficient? For example, if someone tries to access a certain resource, they're not able to, right? How do you go about troubleshooting that to make sure you keep to the principle of least privilege, but also give the user the access they need?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about like a least privilege, always, that's why always like when you're going to giving them the resources, as you create the resources, that's why I was just showing at some point was like connecting to the log analytic workspace, right? Like you create that logs. So when you're talking about these guys actually trying to access something, so if you actually add those sign-in logs to those like to the log analytic workspace, same apply when you're creating resources. your resources, let's say as a VM, this guy actually need access to do some sort of a stuff with the key vault, some sort of a stuff on the VM, some sort of this. Azure has like a endless amount of resources. What you're going to do is, as you creating those resources, you make sure creating a log, so always you have something breadcrumb to follow with it. So as they're getting some sort of issues with the joining in, with the identity situation, they're getting failures, that's your signing logs. If they actually have not enough access, similar kind of situation, you got AVD and stuff like that, they're having issues with it. You wanted to understand not only like privilege standpoint, you might wanted to have understanding, okay, like I have this like massive company spend a huge number of dollars to give these people like work remotely. That's the AVD solution. But like everybody's like getting a very slow kind of a response. Your Azure monitors, you can use the log and workspace, look at the Azure monitors, look at the graph and all of that stuff. So first of all, you need to put all of those resources which you're creating, create a workspace or different kind of naming convention, and then you should be able to create some understanding what kind of troubleshooting you'll be doing.
Got it. Thank you.
Jack, more question there? No more questions.
No more questions.
Okay. Fantastic, guys. So going back to the presentation there. So now I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to showcase with you that lab about like uncompromised users and stuff like that. So let's jump onto that lab. Just give me a couple of seconds. So let me sit. All right. Okay, so I'm going to showcase with you, first of all, from the Azure standpoint. Just imagine you have a VM. So the best practice is always when you actually have, typically when you're going to create when you create a VM, you will have, like you will have access to the VM, like typical scenario, you will have a RDP access and another access called Bastion access. So when you're talking about the RDP access, it's just the most not secure way to offering end users. I haven't seen in a production environment RDP is enabled as such. So this is a very not secure approach. So another approach is a Bastion. So Bastion is it's all about it's the same functionality it provides, but like it's an internal way of accessing the environment. So in this scenario, like you will just have a user ID and password set up, and then you're going to log in. You should be able to log into the Bastions. And you will be able to do exactly the similar sort of a situation like as you logging in. So by default, you can see that all those rules are not turned on. So this device is not enabled from the outside at all. But during that, during our process, I will showcase with you how to connect Azure account and or able to get all of the subscriptions and all of that stuff. Just imagine if this tenant got hacked and somebody got access to the your Azure tenant. So let me showcase with you as I'm logging into the tenant. So like as we showcased that your Posh Cloud Shell already. Now let's go there. So if we actually have, so when you connect that, like first of all, in terms of the PowerShell, you have a different options of PowerShell. So one, your like Windows PowerShell, that's your normal PowerShell. The Windows ICE, that's typically like, you know, a lot of people prefer that because you have a really nice panel here where you actually buffer those commands and then run with it. And here with the PowerShell first, let me try to connect that Azure tenant. So first of all, okay, so this is the subscription. So let me connect that Azure tenant. That's your that's a typically goes connect like a connect Azure account. So then you're going to do a work and school connect. Let me get the password. Okay. All right, so now we logged into the tenant. So just imagine like somebody has access to the tenant. Obviously, we in this case, like, you know, I have this particular user has MFA, but like, you know, you will find some of those tenant doesn't have a MFA policies for admin users. So first and foremost, that's the no-go sort of a situation. But still, you'll find some situations we have this similar kind of stuff. So we can first of all, as someone actually logging in, they will be looking at like, okay, what kind of subscription it has, and active subscription it's exist on the tenant. So you can see in this case there is a subscription, and then like we're going to take a look at that. Is that any let's say any virtual machines or any resources which might going to have it will be might be interesting to take a look at it. So so there is a virtual machine sitting at there, and it's on the East US. So that's basically Stateway. They have the locations on, and they will have that what kind of resources might be interesting to them. And then they can also can see what kind of Azure role assignment there. So that's why they will know like which users might they want to see that on that tenant, and what kind of the roles they have. So you can see a bunch of users with the admin access. So so that's the way. And also you can see like somebody called hackers also have admin access. So I mean, you will typically like, you know, the hackers not going to keep their name as a hacker, so you'll find as a generic users. But like, you know, you will that gives away some, you know, like as you logging in, if you see some of the stuff in admin users, so you need to like look for you know who you need to send you know, to have the attack, and who will be your target, who you wanted to get access from and do some damage. And the typical approach is there any storage account also available in the tenant? So something we can actually use and see any kind of available data. So you can see there is a storage accounts there, and there is a you know bunch of storage also that should be available for use. That's some of the stuff also. And also you wanted to see any kind of like, you know, key vault exist in the tenant also. So you know, like, you know, if you using the managed identity, if you're using a key vault, that's also not a best practice. So when you think about using a managed identity, if you logging into some VM, and if they're using managed identity, say they can use the key vault or similar kind of resource straight away without any password. But a stale managed identity, of course, like a managed identity is a good practice, but don't make sure like I don't have managed identity which is not managed, not like governed without any governance, because this can be damaging. And then we can actually just go, if we wanted to say what is that VM, so we can actually just take a look at that, all the details related to that VM. Jack?
Yes, Daniel has a question. I'm going to pull him online now. Hey, Daniel, could you turn your camera on?
Hey, yeah. I was wondering when you're logging in and performing these actions, if somebody's an admin in Azure, is there a way that they can see all of the actions being done by that, like everything people have done in PowerShell sessions? Like how would that be accessed?
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. It's a great question. With the when they're actually on admin access, literally you can pull who else actually had the role and what kind of role they have, and you can actually also turn off that, like the activity logs. You can disable the active like a security center, all kind of flags and stuff like that. So when you actually on the when you actually on it's if you can actually just when you're when you're an admin login, you should be able to pull out all kind of logs, like what is the subscription like I'm doing. And also if you have if you have an admin access on the web interface, you can also go to the log analytic workspace and look at the KQL log to pull out all the other details. But all possible, Daniel.
And those logs, they're like, I imagine they're write only, right? So like an attacker can't, or maybe they can, I don't know, but they can't like delete their own logs, right? Or maybe.
Oh, they can delete their own log by all means. So what they can do, yeah, but they can actually take that all the breadcrumb away. They can take like they can like vanish those from their own breadcrumbs from the activity log. They can turn off that security center flag, so it's not going to give them like any security admins. They cannot see the flags that something really happened. So yeah, that's so much can be someone can do. That's why we say when you actually running a environment like that, making sure those users who actually have a privilege account, those privilege account protected by the MFA, the least privilege kind of approach. And also when you go into the PIM setup, you can also you also can actually define that, okay, once I set up PIM, the once I turn out on, like my manager need to approve that, something along that line. You can create a second level visibility, something along that line. But yeah, it is a very powerful tool. So, and also it can bypass. Actually, I'm going to showcase with you as a next approach how to bypass the security. Like how I can turn on the RDP allow, RDP port allowed, and then like that users can do a RDP to that all of a sudden, that new VM. And I will also show you that let's say if your admin account get hacked, typically what happened, the admin users not going to damage that when that admin account got like hacked, they create another admin account, they use that account to damage more. Because like if I'm actually having admin account, and most likely I as an admin I will get some sort of notifications and stuff like that. What the idea is, create very minimal friction on that hacking account, and then use a parallel one or more hacking account, do the damage with those. So that would be very difficult for internal security admins to really understand what's really happened. And that's a time is matters, right? First 8 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours, they will be walking away what they want to do, because like they have 4 other admins already exist with a genuine name, not like in a hackers on stuff like that. Most boring name they will give it to those users. So yeah.
Yeah, very clever.
Thank you. All right. So let me walk into go. Okay. So here you can see with the so here what with the gate VM. So now I know that VMs what kind of size is and what kind of what the location is. So typically what happened when the hackers is in, they will get the VM size, they want to create a huge noise. So I'm not going to run that command because that's going to restart that whole the whole the VM. What I wanted to show you is this is it's let's say if we run this this command, let me showcase that here. So if we actually run this command, what's going to happen is it's going to change that VM size. So if you see right now the B2M is going to change that size to a different size of the VM. And what does that mean? Just imagine if you got hacked, if hackers wanted to turn your attention to something else, they will create multiple VM, they will change the VM size, restart this VM. You can do all kind of noise while you actually focusing on a storage account. So this is basically you will create a denial of attack, different kind of noise, and while you targeting something else. So it's all possible as the attackers coming into your inbox. So that's a one way of explaining it. So let me, like I shown you this. Go ahead, Jack.
And Andy, I have a question. How do you mitigate an attacker from gaining access to other resources when they do when there is a breach? How do you how do you minimize the damage done?
Yeah, great question, Jack. So just think about as you actually have access to the as you first of all, as you know, there is something involved. There is a attacker there. There is a one service account. I just done a forensic investigation. So one of the customers had they actually supporting their client, and their client, they have a multiple client, and each client they had a service account, and they have thousands of clients, right? And what happened, their service account got hacked. And what really happened, some attackers are using from the different part of the world, try to attack the use the service account and create hundreds of VMs. So when I got involved, that's the first things I have done, ask our client how many service account you have engaged with how many different clients. They had about 10 to 20 service account, which is they connected with a different client. First thing first, we needed to do in that case, take that active token out, reset that active sessions, and that means all the token get resetted, and then reset the password. So it's basically what does that mean? If somebody is trying to access that account, if they have an active session, they no longer have the active session. At that point, if they actually reset the password, they don't have access to that. Of course, on the top of that, you can put a geofencing as you understand which part of the world they're coming. Are they have any business? Are you having any business on those part of the world? If you don't, let's put a geofencing. Then you have another layer. That's your conditional access policy, like we discussed. It's a software firewall and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you. And so let's talk about when we looked at the initially. Let's see here. That's your let's take a look at this that VM which we are looking at, and the attackers are actually already in. I understand there is a VM exists in the environment, and this VM don't have a network. They don't have a they are port enabled for external access. So that's the RDP, but it's basically only private access to the bastion. So what attacker will do, let's try to open that their power, like they open the RDP port using PowerShell. So like they can actually just accumulate that attack from the different part of the world, right? So let's try that. So how are you going to do that? This is another PowerShell command. Let me try to do that. So that's create that policy first, and let's try to activate that policy. Create that proper NSG rules, and let's see what we can do, and then we can actually take a look at that the graphics interface. So see that like now it is success. So now like let me go have a look at that. So if I refresh that, let's say voila. So you can see that now this is available for external access. So now all we need to do is see that like what's there, like if what's that public IP address. If we find that public IP address, then like we should be able to figure it out like on how to access that VM, and that's all. So if we think about like how to find that public IP address, so there will be another command there. Let me try that. So there you go. So now you have that public address. You have that like in your RDP protocol also enable. Now you're almost there. Now let's create a admin user with the with new admin user, which we're going to use that for doing the actual damage, right? So this is the another PowerShell command to create that admin user. Let me clean up that interface a little bit. So now I created PowerShell command, and I created that user ID using the PowerShell. That's your Luis. I mean, like a pretty typical, right? So that's your identity. That's your ID. So now, if I take a look at it, your tenant, I will see a bunch of users already created. You can see like hundreds of other users are there. Then like in a couple of hacking account, obviously like in a real world situation, you won't see that account pretty like these kind of hackers names. Like I created, it will be called Louis, and like as everybody, the idea is they wanted to blend it in with your other users, like a similar kind of a thing, which is so it will be really difficult to do like look at the breadcrumb, right? And then you wanted to put those like let's see what is this there. I need to have this object ID to. All right, so let me give Louis access to the subscription. So let me give that object ID. Just give me a second. I'm building that command real quick. Okay, so that's just give me a second. Okay, so now you can see I able to give Louis to the subscriptions, and basically like what's the subscription ID. So now Louis is owner of that subscription. So now like that's basically where that VM sits, and the VM sits in the subscriptions. I already done the subscription from the initial part of my discovery on the tenant as a hacker. Then I found that VM, which is interest to me. I created a Louis to the subscription. So technically, I mean Louis also owner of that VM also. So so then what I've done like as a hacker, I wanted to make sure like I clean up my whatever I'm doing, like and just make sure like there's no evidence in there. So it's I basically like getting rid of all of my the logs related to what I'm doing here. In this case, I'm not going to delete all of my logs because I'm going to showcase with you some of the investigations. And also, if it Azure security alert related stuff, I can also disable that from there. Jack.
Yes. When a user's account logs get deleted, that's a pretty big red flag. Is there a way that you can get a notification if something like that were to happen?
Yeah. That's where we have something like a Sentinel. Like basically, if you actually have also you can actually use logic apps and stuff like that. If you can create a different parameter, let's say if you actually have something like a Sentinel, any kind of like a security kind of situation does happen, it will create a incident, and that incident depends on what kind of severity that can be allocated to the different team, and they can actually immediately go into the investigation, something along that line. So that's why you need a reactive and proactive tool. So when we're talking about the proactive, we're talking about all of the proactive approach, least privilege and PIN and all of that good stuff which we're talking about. And the reactive, which we're talking about, like, okay, why don't you actually set up the sign-in logs and the event logs and all of that to the Sentinel? And that's what creates that ticket. That's what creates like somebody actually getting text message or somebody getting immediate message on their Teams or Slack or something like that. They need to react immediately. So that's basically it.
Thank you.
Question. So so this is another command. That's what you can do that. And yeah, so now like I'm going to debrief that before we can actually take a quick break. So the things is like with the in terms of in terms of like what we learned for what we learned so far is basically like as you get hacked, you're going to the hackers will look at the whole environment, what you actually doing, what is my prime kind of target, and they will make them like the admin, and also they will give them like create extra additional users, and they're going to hide their breadcrumbs. And what you're going to do, set up the conditional access policy, which you're going to set you need to prevent that. You wanted to make sure like VM not using the managed identity if we not needed, if it is not nicely governed, and you're going to use the RBAC least privilege for principal. You will also forward that activity log to us, and the security alerts. You most love if you can afford the Azure, or why don't you use Azure Sentinel, and also in for just-in-time access for those VMs. So this is the part what we actually learn as a part of like the initial part of the lab plus the discussion. So next one will go into the detects and response to the identity-based attack. So like now, what are you going to do as a system admin as you notice that like there is something going terribly wrong? So what are you going to do about it? So this we're going to learn as a next part.
Yes, we have one question. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name, Andre. Um, as I understand it, with the NSG rule Nandy's putting in, he's finding the public IP, so only his machine's IP can then access the open port 3389 to RDP into the machine, along with creating a new Entra user to log into that machine to manage. Is that an accurate understanding?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like when you're going to create, I think like I understood that. So there is a two kind of identity which you're talking about, as a Entra ID based identity as the local user. So when you want to do a RDP, obviously, like you can actually have a local user based identity, like you actually go to computer management, you open that stuff like as a identity, and also you have a cloud identity. So like an Entra identity, as you're creating that, you can assign that identity to have access to RDP to that VM. So that means that user should be able to log into that machine, so with the Entra access. Daniel.
Sorry, just a quick
Daniel, go
question
ahead.
about that. When you were talking about having local users, um, would that be different from having like just a regular Active Directory user, or is it like integrated with that? Because for local users in my own network, I would think of like, well, they'd be Active Directory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic question. So there is a local user in that terms. Just think about like a computer itself has a little database, right? Active Directory is a database, like an on-prem. So if you actually had a stretch that on-prem environment to the Entra, so let's say you add AD Sync or Cloud Syncs, whatever sort of a situation, you getting that user extension to that user to the cloud, and then you also using Kerberos authentications on that cloud infrastructure to make sure those users can also have access to those VMs. Not only the VMs, if you wanted to use the other sort of like AVD or on Intune and stuff like that, you can. But in this case, we're talking about like a local user, means on the VM based user, and also because it sits on the top of Entra, you can also give that user to the subscription. In that way, you are also saying, okay, like you got access to the VM, because there is a RBAC rule allows you to access to that VM as a RDP access. There is a little bit juggery pokery, but you can. But like when you're talking about the hackers, they're more smarter than us. So obviously, like they knows what to do, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Right. We have another question.
Thanks, Jacob. So this is a really fascinating discussion on attack scenarios, Andy, and I appreciate kind of the conversation around like how bad actors can actually take advantage of different permissions, right, in Microsoft Azure, and kind of what living off the land actually means in this case. So I appreciate that. I think from just a quick question on that is, I get the need to set up Sentinel and other alerts and notifications for these open resource groups and so on. Are there restrictions in place for that would prevent a bad actor from perhaps deleting existing owner accounts, right, that are associated with other like legitimate owner accounts, basically locking admins and other owners out of the account itself?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, so let's say, obviously you can from the resource standpoint, you can actually put a resource lock from the resource group level, and from the owner standpoint, you can, like there is a way you can actually put those. Or you can put an automation there. If anybody changing any role, such as high privilege roles, they will get a they will get a notification before this can be done. So yes, there is a your high value account. So let's say break glass account is a very high value account. So every tenant should have a break glass account, and we need to make sure nobody can have access to the break glass account, or nobody can reduce the break glass accounts privilege as well. So this is all applies with your super admin and all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, this is the best practice we can put it, like to make sure first of all, people cannot have access. When they have access, they cannot change some of the stuff. If they can change, what you can do within first 1 hour or something along that line before they do significant damage. And that's why also you have segmentations and multiple subscriptions and all of that stuff. There's just so many things, governance you can do to make sure follow the best practice. I would say, like I always follow the zero trust. So unless like from the identity standpoint, from the resource standpoint, if we follow the zero trust methodology, I think like that's the way you will have all of the bits and parts which is Microsoft already thought out for all of us, instead of like we need to bang our head on the wall.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. So, Jack, do we take a quick break, or shall we continue?
I can keep going. If you need a break, it'd be a good idea to take a break. Whatever you need.
Okay, let me. Okay, we can actually just continue that the lab sessions. Most probably, it will be a good idea to like let's carry on and see that next part, and maybe like we can, if everything covers, then we can take a break and done for today, right? So
Sounds good.
let's try that. Sounds good. Okay. So on part so let's look at the lab too. So in this lab, I'm going to touch base upon, let's say once you actually have attacks already in that environment doing their own thing. As an admin, what we trying to look at it, like as to make sure like things are in place and things are like in a way, at least like at start with, I have some way to start gathering information. So with that thought, let's see, as a system admin, I will go into, first of all, like I touch base on my other discussions, like with your sign-in logs, and have the diagnostic settings. First of all, like you need to make sure, every tenant need to make sure like these settings with the logs are enabled. That's your like as it says, like audit logs, sign-in logs, and risky user, risky sign-in, and all kind of workload related logs are getting forwarded. Basically, out of the box, a tenant doesn't offer that like large amount of logs because that's cost money. So that means you need to add a subscription, something along that line, to do that. So and what it does offer, that's created really beautiful sign-in logs, offers beyond then like in your last 1 month sort of approach. And also you, as things goes, you should be able to see what's going on in terms of your sign-on logs. So if you see any kind of some special situation, you can see last 24 hours. So you can see some like people are logging in from the Virginia, Newark, and let's see like what happened last 7 days, perhaps. So I will see if I see any users logging from the different country, perhaps, or different kind of like a different kind of a breadcrumb. So like something I can actually just start joining the dots. So it's going to take me a little bit time to let me see. So that's a geo like interface. What you can actually see from the sign-in log. So let me see from the while it is gathering what I can do from the Graph API. So again, I'm going to use the PowerShell command to use the Graph API. So it's already logged in. So it's actually taking that PowerShell complete. So to use that to connect to the Graph API. And then I'm going to take a look at that. What's going on the last 24 hours as a failed sign-in log. So that's basically, I wanted to take a look at it. If I find any further hints, so let's try to it's Graph API also very slow, by the way. So you need to see. So look at that. I found something like something interrupt. Okay, like what I'm looking at is there something. I can see a bunch of like Graph API logging from the Washington. Okay, so now all of a sudden, wow. So this is a different country. This is coming from the France, right? So so this is come from the different countries altogether. So that's gives away some of the stuff. Okay, like my user ID got used in some of the user ID, even admin user ID got used by the by somebody else other than our typical Washington and Newark or something along that line. Like at least like I want to see within the US, this is my typical access space. And then I'm seeing like other users got access. Somebody tried from the different planet altogether and had a success. So that's actually kind of a giveaway sort of a thing. What's really happening? So let's see if my PowerShell also cooked out by now. So let's see. Okay, like now it's ready.
Hey,
Go ahead,
Nandi.
Jack.
Yes, Daniel has a question. Daniel, you're online. You just need to turn your camera on.
Hey, I was wondering when you're in that web interface, how good is
Mhm.
the Copilot integration? Like, could I just say, yeah, check for any? Can I ask Copilot from there? I'd be like, check for any logins outside of the US or something like that. Like,
Hey
does it
man,
integrate?
I was actually working. I was actually working with the Microsoft internal team with the Copilot and the security staff. Actually, it's interesting you say that. So
Very
I will
cool.
give you a diplomatic answer, and I will give you another answer. Okay, perhaps I'm not going to give you any answer like on an open forum. So the yes, Copilot actually working with all of the security tools, and a Copilot working with a Copilot has modules. So like under the hood, what really we are doing the PowerShell. Just imagine Copilot also going to, as you typing things, the Copilot, what is doing at the back end is connecting those modules for you, right? And bring up all of those like data what you need. Now, in a real world situation, as we know, it's not perfect. Okay, so people out there still figuring it out, like how Copilot will dishing out information. So I know, like, I was a part of like Copilot and security team, and I was doing that project. So it's a lot of data coming through it in a Copilot way, and the algorithm is still not perfect. But your answer is yes. Maybe like wait for another year or more than 1 year. So
Okay, that was
that's the
very
answer for
diplomatic.
you.
Thank you.
So exactly. Thank you. That is a good question, actually. So all right. So now as we got uh, as we got this the graph API connected, now I can see uh, or who actually had last 48 hours, 24 hours had a failed login. So that's kind of a giveaway, like something along that line. Now, also, I tell my administrator at the logging in, you wanted to know when they're trying to log in, like when these guys they're trying to, if they're logging in, it's really weird hours. Like you never seen a admin guy logging in to 2 a.m., 3 a.m. at middle of the dark night, because like you guys are on the part of the SOC team, so you know like which their what their typically logging time is. This kind of stuff, like you will just add dots. First of all, where they're logging from, failures, time of the logins, all of that stuff will give you a okay, like, and also how many aggregated logging happen within the smaller period of time, and how many failures happen in a smaller period of time. So you can like you can calculate that in your mind. Okay, like something odd about that user ID, and even they having a successful logging last few times, I don't trust those things is a correct successful logging. And you need to create this kind of breadcrumb when you actually have, just imagine if you have an environment, you have huge sign-in logs, huge kind of like a large amount of sign-in logs, exports, audit logs, and stuff like that. Typically, with a forensic environment, you will get a 10 or 15 audit log. They will export to you. Most likely, you, as a forensic, you're not going to get access immediately. And then you need to analyze all of that stuff, aggregate the data. You need to create 3 or 4 user ID to narrow down that, and then go into the further investigation on those user IDs. So so let's say as you going into that stuff, like you wanted to you found that some of this users questionable, then you're going to take a look at that. Is there any kind of impact these users done on the subscriptions? What kind of role change happening on the subscription? let me take a look at that. Is there any role change happening? Because if any role change happen with any subscription, that's also a giveaway, like what really most possible. So if I see, okay, look at the Luis actually made have got access to the subscriptions recently. So that's kind of an interesting way of understanding. Okay, I don't like those two users. Typically, like you wouldn't see any user called hackers, by the way, but I see like this user all of the sudden owner. So now I'm going to put my attention to those users because these are latest and the other user I already know. So this is basically a one way of understanding like where are you going that. So there's another way of you can take a look at that. That's your log analytic workspace. So let's take a look at the like what you actually have in a log analytic workspace. That's another way, similar kind of stuff what we already done. I'm going to do that in a log analytic workspace. So here, just imagine like you have the workspace set up, and you know your KQL queries. So it's basically you're going to set that as a KQL mode, and then you're going to run with it. So the idea is you wanted to understand last 24 hours of what the changes and what kind of target they happen. And I typically do 48 hours, actually just add a little bit more data to it. So then I would understand, okay, like the mode administrator made some of the stuff. So all of that stuff I see here, mode administrator made changes. So if I do it like next 24 hours, I will say Luis actually making changes. So this is giveaway sort of this idea like what users are primarily use making changes on the different subscription and different privilege sort of a situation. So once I know what I needed to know, let me see if I can actually like revoke Luis's access. So because I highlighted like these guys most probably most probably the hacker. Now my goal is the first thing first. I remember Jack asked questions like what we really do at start with. That's what we do is we're going to try to revoke Luis's access. Just give me a second. Let me try again. Okay, so just give me a second. So this is the user principal, and then I'm going to revoke sign in for this guy. So this is separate actually. There you go. So so it's basically like your now I revoke that guy's active token. So it's a and then I'm going to block this guy's access, reset this password. So and so now like I'm going to like let's try to reset his password. On the PowerShell. That's give me a second. All right. Let me, okay. Let me do that new password here. Voila. So now you can see that Lewis's the active token is gone away, and then the password also gone away. So
Hi, Nandi. It's me now.
yeah,
I think I've taken over from Jacob. So I think we have a
okay, go ahead.
question from Gian, actually. So I think I'll let Gian ask the question himself. So I'll just put him online now.
All right. Thank you,
Hey.
Andy. So this is really great example, kind of, and I appreciate you walking us through like how you can do this type of revocation. Is there ability to do this in bulk for assuming if the bad actor creates multiple accounts or dummy accounts to try to throw you off the trail? Are you able to do this in bulk, and then also through scripting on
Absolutely.
PowerShell level, do this, basically automate
Absolutely.
this type of process?
And absolutely. So this is what I recommend for Sentinel. It's a god like gonna give us like a that's basically has all the logic apps and all of that stuff. What you can do, you can just say if you just get like this many atoms, and after access you can bind that logic, and then like you'll say like you can automate a automation with the Sentinel that is automatically going to take the active token out and the reset password, and by the time create a incident report. And also I recommend that like when you create an incident report, you add a total full guide. That's what I do. Like I add a guide, which is I actually do a screenshot for a help desk SOC team to take a look at that users as a part of the incident. So what really happened, whenever something happened, automation does their magic, and but the incident is still stay up. And as the incident created, as the automation happened, what automation done to that that incident, and plus add a word file with a step-by-step task for a help desk team what they needed to do, such as follow that look at the screenshot what I have actually done with the look at the users, look at that audit, blah blah blah, call that users and all of that. So first you have an automation toward like using tools, and then the human touch, they will do the other part of the work, make sure reset that they are MFA, make sure they look at all the there's some events, not only the user, you also isolate that like a device, right, to make sure they all of that stuff happen. Now help desk going to, as they go through the physical investigations, as they go through the have a discussion with the individual users, they will enable that device, they will do that all the remediations before they finalize the incident.
Perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good question. So this is basically it, and just like we obviously like we reset the password, and then we managed to block the users, and this is basically part of that stuff. What we learned is you're going to as a system admin, obviously you're going to put that like some of the users, make sure they have CA policy, conditional policies applied on them. You are using the Azure sign-in logs, try to do it like a monitoring, and or what kind of users you have, what kind of users they're having issues with, and also you using follow that stuff. If you actually following that log into workspace and follow up with the Sentinel. I didn't go into the Sentinel to details on this webinar. Most probably we'll go into the Sentinels on the next one, of course. And make sure like an Azure P2 enable, so you can actually do a risky sign in risky users. You can take a look at that and put the conditional access policy accordingly. We can also again turn on the PIM, and also look at the audit log if and unusual activities in place. So this is basically our today's scope, and part of this scope, we done a bunch of best practices in terms of the identity and Azure security, and also done the lab. On the next one, we'll go a little bit more details, perhaps touch base on some of the best practice related to conditional access policy, some of the best practice with the Sentinel or something like this. Like, and we will showcase some of the best practices, and also we can recap some of the best practice related to the identity and Azure. Thank you, everybody. Hashem.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you, Nandi. That was really nice and very informative, especially for me, someone who doesn't really have a cybersecurity background. I found that really nice to follow, actually. So thank you for that. But I think we have actually one question, so we're not done yet for the day. I think Daniel has a question, so I'll just put him online so he can ask his question, if that's okay.
Hey.
Oh no,
yeah.
that Daniel again.
Question. Yeah, I know. I was too curious. I was like, I know everyone wants to rest, but I'm not going to allow it.
No. Good man. Go ahead.
I was wondering. So we've done this stuff through PowerShell, and you've done it on the web interface. Is there like an HTTP API or some kind of API? So if I wanted to do this through like Python or Golang, I could do it, or is it basically like you're either doing PowerShell or
that's like, and you have, like, we actually using the Graph API part of the PowerShell. You can connect the same API endpoints using your automation tool, using your Python script and all of that stuff. Microsoft APIs are not just like in a base practice, like in a base secure kind of a thing, but at the same time that offers your different kind of management and the automations and stuff like that. Microsoft is decommissioning all the traditional modules with the Microsoft Azure AD and stuff like that, and they're pushing more and more Graph API standpoint. So like you, as you said, like you can connect the API endpoints and do a lot of things. And most of those like administration third-party tools these days, which is they're offering Azure management and stuff, they're all using API.
Interesting, which is scary too, because API keys are a lot easier to steal than passwords sometimes, and don't have two-factor authentication or anything a lot of the time. So
there you go. This that's the same thing what I actually mentioned, that managed identity. So when you actually have a managed identity, the service account, service principal, and that kind of approach, you need to make sure the governance in place. You need to make sure audit in place, because like if those managed identity and similar kind of concept get like kind of vulnerable, so all of those stuff. So let's say, imagine if the VM got like got hacked. Let's say if it is a managed account, managed identity in use, imagine that VM actually have access to the key vault. Imagine your key vault have all of those keys and all of this other stuff. Literally, you allow that VM to use that VM to do whatever they want. So only the attackers need to attack the VM, and then they will know what kind of managed, they knows, because the managed identity use, that means they have a free pass. So again, when we actually have those automation, we need a proper governance and make sure this auditing in place, like a time-based auditing and all the kind of stuff. So that's, and also you need to have the same tools. So make sure like some automation in place, so you have a little bit more visibility. So if it is like that endpoint was accessed from somewhere else, okay, that's a giveaway, something going wrong. You have a geofencing in place. You have a trusted network, so only like that API have access to that endpoint, have access to that specific trusted environment. So yeah, this is a kind of like like pretty broad way of saying it, but Microsoft offers all of that stuff. It's just a matter is that a lot of customers only use the features and functionality, not that security governance, what Microsoft offers in a zero trust standpoint.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Fantastic. So,
thank you everyone for coming. I think I think we got a few messages from Andrea actually. Andrea would like to thank you. I know that you probably don't have access to your LinkedIn messages, but she just left us a really nice comment there, and she's been very engaged on the LinkedIn side. So thank you, Andrea. Actually, I think and Andy would agree. So thank you everyone for attending. These are going to be a regular thing, so kind of watch out for your invites. We'll make sure to invite everyone who's attended today to future webinar sessions, and we hope to see you again soon. So thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye. Bye-bye.